What is going on, Notre Dame football fans? Happy Thursday. I'm Tyler Horka. That's Kyle Kelly. This is the Notre Dame recruiting update with Mike Singer, but it's us two for the second week in a row, and I think people are fine with that. We did it. We did a decent enough job last week, Kyle, that we can try to run this back and do it again. It's going to be a pretty easy one this week as well because it wasn't just any week in Notre Dame recruiting. It was a pretty busy one. We're going to talk about what happened on that front. Notre Dame getting 2025 offensive lineman to flip to the Irish and a 2025 quarterback as well. We're obviously going to start with that latter one because I think that's the one that everyone's been talking about the most. And it's kind of crazy though, Kyle, because if the quarterback thing didn't happen, we'd probably be talking about that offensive line commit because that was a pretty big deal as well. But like I said, it wasn't just any week. It was kind of a bang bang type of thing, and here we are. We're about to dive into some pretty interesting 2025 Notre Dame recruiting tidbits and commits.
I'm surprised no pleasantries before the show because I was going to joke with you that you kind of sound a little bit under the weather the way Jack Sobel sounded last Monday, as Marcus Freeman pointed out. So you doing all right? Allergy season, just changing weather, or am I just overthinking this one?
I think it's changing weather. As you can see, I'm rocking the On3 hoodie. Really the first time all year. Took the dog outside this morning and it was 32 degrees. So I had to document that on Instagram and Snapchat and whatnot. Just show all my friends down in Texas, hey, I know you guys got a cool front this week, but we got a cold front. It's actually cold in the Midwest. It's not just cool like it is in Texas. So yeah, that's probably all it is. Do I sound as bad as Jack did that one day with Marcus Freeman?
No.
When I get on Thursday with Marcus Freeman here in a hour and a half, 90 minutes, is he going to say something?
I don't know. I think you should be okay. I think Marcus is pretty focused during these Thursday pressers. He's all down to business. I'm not sure how much joking and smiling and laughing he's going to be doing about 48 hours before this game.
Yeah, well, let's get down to business with what I was talking about to lead this thing off. So quarterback that I was just talking about is Blake Hebert. He's a real surprise commit, you could call him, from the 2025 class because, Kyle, he's been committed to Clemson for, almost a year and a half now, definitely over a year. So there's some history there with Notre Dame, though. So he's the number 420 overall player, according to the On3 industry ranking in the class of 2025. Number 30 quarterback, number 3 prospect in Connecticut. So he took an unofficial visit to Notre Dame in June of 2023. But then 6 days later, that's when he commits to Clemson. And it's kind of been a done deal for him, it felt like, ever since then, for him and the Tigers. But Kyle, as soon as Deuce Knight decommits, really, as soon as Deuce Knight even has the thought of decommitting, and that's been kind of dominating our space for months now, finally happened a couple of weeks ago, Notre Dame's been having to do some legwork and say, hey, who do we have as options as quarterbacks in this 2025 class? And that's really what it comes down to. They go back and look at the kids who they had previous relationships. Like I said, this goes back to the summer of 2023. And ultimately, here's Blake Hebert, now a Notre Dame commit, not a Clemson commit. What am I missing there? Kind of fill us in on the backstory of how this came to be.
Yeah, so full transparency, when I did my report when Deuce Knight decommitted, I'll actually share it now, even though it was a premium story. I mentioned 6 quarterbacks I thought Notre Dame should target following Deuce Knight's decommitment, and the whole theme and lead of the story was going after SoCal passers, just because Notre Dame's been successful there in the past with getting 5-stars Jimmy Clausen and Dane Chris, and then I know guys like Steve Berline, very talented and accoladed quarterback in Notre Dame. So I thought that if they need a guy late in this cycle, SoCal would be the way to go. I did lead it with Bryce Baker as well, a quarterback from North Carolina, just because he's a really talented passer. And from my knowledge, did have some interest in Notre Dame, and especially with where North Carolina is as a program right now with Mac Brown. I believed Notre Dame could go after him and perhaps flip him if they were interested. So kind of going back to my initial point of the SoCal quarterbacks, mentioned guys like Jackson Collick, Dash Beerley from Modern Day, also Wyatt Becker, a guy from Sierra Canyon, and then last but not least, Leo Hannon from Servite High School in the Trinity League. Then I also mentioned 10 other names that I kind of considered for my report, but I didn't want to spotlight them for one reason or another. If you look on that list, Blake Hebert's name is nowhere to be found. So I didn't see this one coming. Other Notre Dame reporters on the beat didn't see this coming. I don't think anyone saw this coming besides Notre Dame coaching staff, maybe some of the Clemson coaching staff, and some of the people at Brunswick School, which is where Pete Bavacqua ironically graduated as a valedictorian. So this was a true recruiting surprise to me. I can pretty much count on one hand the amount of times I've been surprised by a commitment. This one absolutely knocked my socks off. I was not expecting this whatsoever. But just to kind of get right down to it, how this one sort of unfolded. Basically, Deuce Knight, Notre Dame's longtime quarterback commit, going back to September of 2023. Started flirting with Auburn back in July, made a visit there, a handful of game day visits, including official visit for the Oklahoma game at the end of September. From my understanding, Auburn more or less kind of gave him an ultimatum, like, hey, man, you got to flip to us or we're moving on to other guys. So we kind of expected for most of the month of September and ever since Deuce Knight flipped back in July that he was going to end up in Auburn's class. Notre Dame was also doing work behind the scenes to identify other quarterback targets. And this football season, Blake Hebert pretty much emerged as the guy. There's some talk about, I don't want to speculate too much with rumors and things of that sort, but there's some talk that a couple members of the Notre Dame coaching staff, led by general manager Chad Bowden and quarterbacks coach Gino Guidugli, made it out to Brunswick School sometime this season during the evaluation period. Would not be surprised if that occurred during the bye week because you don't really hear of Notre Dame coaches going on the road during the season. So Notre Dame did a pretty extensive evaluation of Hebert, and he reemerged as their guy. And this is something that Mike Singer and I have kind of learned behind the scenes, that when Hebert visited Notre Dame in June of 2023, he was actually their number one target over Deuce Knight, but Hebert ended up committing to Clemson 6 days later, as you pointed out. So once Hebert committed to Clemson, Notre Dame had to pivot back to Deuce Knight, who they obviously really loved. They really invested a lot of time, energy in Deuce Knight. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if Notre Dame could even project Deuce Knight's trajectory going into his senior season, where he lit up the OT7 7-on-7 circuit in the Elite 11, where On3's Charles Power named him MVP. But still, going back to June 2023, Blake Hebert was their number one guy in the class after they offered him in June. So when Deuce Knight started to waver, they circled back to Hebert. It was a very tricky process because Clemson is very strict about their commits talking to other schools. They don't really allow it with their policy they have in the place. If their commits in the class end up visiting other programs, they're automatically decommitted. We've seen that in the past where guys have wanted to visit schools and they've actually decommitted from Clemson and gone to see a school and actually recommitted to Clemson. But Hebert never did that. His only visit to Notre Dame was back in June 2023. So Notre Dame really working behind the scenes to get him in the class. Everything came to a head Monday. They were successfully able to flip him from Clemson. Notre Dame has their headliner at quarterback in the class. Also, pretty exciting one considering that he comes from Brunswick School, where two Notre Dame commits are at, Matty Augustine and Ethan Long. So it was a pretty interesting process because Notre Dame didn't put any names out there. We are told that there are a couple guys that did have interest in Notre Dame, namely IMG's Ty Hawkins, who's committed to SMU, also Bryce Baker down there in North Carolina, who's committed to the in-state Tar Heels, and then Cal's quarterback commit from Hawaii, who picked up an offer from Oregon. He's a tough pronunciation, so I'm not going to try that one. But Notre Dame preferred Hebert in the end. That was the guy they went after, and he's the guy that they are going to move forward as their quarterback for the future.
All right, we got so much more coming on Hebert, but first, Kyle, we got to pay some bills, and I got to tell you, if I wasn't rocking this On3 hoodie that I showed you guys earlier, and I'll show you again, I'd probably be wearing some Roback right now because we're both golfers. I think they got the best fall golf apparel in the game. I mean, stay warm, but stay fit, stay active. It's all great, as you're seeing on the screen there. Great Notre Dame drop as well. I believe Mike Singer has a bunch of that, and he looks good every time he pops on the show with that. So there's only one way to describe Roback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable active wear. Roback just released their new licensed game day collection, and it's awesome. That's what you're seeing on the screen there. Appreciate you if you're watching on YouTube. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, which I got to mention, all my friends down in Texas, every time they go to a game, their season ticket holders, they're wearing the Roback drop, man. Golf course, football games, all of it. Roback's got it all. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Roback's everyday shorts are the perfect pairing as well. They are so comfortable, have an elastic waistband and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short, but the comfort of an athletic short. Roback also has been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with past Notre Dame stars Audric Estime, Kyle Hamilton, and Michael Mayer, and current athletes as well. Riley Leonard, Ben Morrison, among other big-time college football players. They are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. Use the code BLUEGOLD20 on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's RHOBACK.com. 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code BLUEGOLD20. Yeah, it's awesome stuff, man. I love Roback.
We got to get us some gear for our next tea time. I'm not ruling out a tea time before the end of the year, but might have to wait till next spring.
No, I would love it. I'm looking like next week, bro. It's 70s and whatnot, but I got to go out of town again. Jack is so I'm going to the Georgia Tech game. Jack Sobor, our colleague, he's going to MetLife's next week for the Navy game. But I have a wedding on Friday, so I'm going to be kind of double dipping. Friday wedding in Texas, sitting on the couch watching that game. So a lot of travel, man, and that kind of takes away from the golf time, doesn't it? But you know that all too well. Are you guys tea time? Greg's not a golfer, obviously.
Tee him up. Hit the links. Hey, real quick, how's our course doing over there in I think Mishawaka, Judy Creek?
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I haven't read anything. For those who aren't aware, aren't local in South Bend, me and Kyle played this golf course in August, I want to say. And what was it? A couple weeks later, clubhouse went up in flames. I haven't even checked in on what the why that happened, but it's crazy. And then a couple weeks after that, the apartment complex that I live in here in Mishawaka, one of the buildings, Kyle, you know the place, giant buildings, right? Giant complex. One of the buildings is completely ruined because of a fire that happened like 2 weeks after the Jude Creek one. So tough stuff. Speaking of tough, though, I was watching some highlights from Blake Hebert. Tough kid, dude. That's like my first takeaway is big dude, strong dude. Doesn't look to run first, but can run. So we'll mention some of his statistics here. He's originally from Vancouver, moved to Massachusetts when he was 14, attended Lawrence, Massachusetts Central Catholic. That's where Preston Zinter went to school, Notre Dame linebacker. As a sophomore, Hebert completed 60% of his passes for 1,700 yards, 24 touchdowns in 12 games. And he suffered a broken ankle in the first game of his junior year. That sidelined him for that entire season. So John asked a question in the chat a little bit earlier about that injury, and maybe that affected his rankings. And if he comes back and plays well, which he seems to be doing right now in his senior year, maybe he goes up in the rankings. So he's doing what he's doing now at Greenwich in Connecticut. He transferred there, and that's where you mentioned, Kyle, that there's a couple of Notre Dame commits who are there as well, Matty Augustine and Ethan Long. So through 5 games this year, 50 of 92 for 900 yards, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I've got a thought on those picks when we see the highlights here. But he also has 23 carries for 234 yards and 7 more scores, and that's where it kind of starts for me. Well, I guess there's two things. Cannon of an arm, as you're seeing there on YouTube, but also he can run if he wants, and he's tough to tackle. I'm not sure if they already show. It was the very beginning of this video, I think, Kyle, where he was running away from dudes on like a 70-yard touchdown run, and I feel like that is definitely something worth noting. The arm is something worth noting, and then also in this highlight package, there's a straight up goal line RPO where it's like what you saw from Riley Leonard in the Stanford game, where he fakes the handoff, looks like he's going to run, and then ends up just dumping it off to Eli Raridan or like whoever you want to say for Notre Dame. Like he's got that capability in his game, so I'm not surprised that obviously Mike Denbrock is in these conversations. Who do we get now that Deuce Knight has decommitted? It seems like he's a good fit. Mike Denbrock can do some things with this kid, and yeah, I mean, throws the ball, runs the ball. Pretty good quarterback from what I was seeing in these highlights.
Yeah, really exciting pickup for Notre Dame. And, I know John mentions back in the chat about Hebert's rankings. He currently ranks as the number 430 overall player, number 420 overall player, number 30 quarterback nationally, number 3 player in Connecticut, according to the On3 industry rankings, which weights the 4 primary recruiting media services, On3, 24/7 Sports, Rivals.com, and ESPN. But before Hebert's junior season, which was pretty much cut short, it was cut short for basically the entirety of it due to an ankle injury. Hebert was pretty highly ranked in the class as a number 187 overall player, number 13 quarterback in the class, and top prospect in Massachusetts back when he was going to Lawrence Central Catholic there. So I think this is a guy that could certainly rise in the rankings, especially because of how well he's playing during his senior season. So I kind of wanted to bring Charles Power into the mix here. Unfortunately, I don't have Charles queued up live, but just wanted to read Charles's report that he gave On3's Mike Singer earlier this week after Hebert committed. Charles is On3's director of scouting and rankings here at On3, and he gave a pretty great report on Hebert after he flipped his commitment from Clemson to Notre Dame. I'm going to pop the highlights back on here. So this is what Power said. Hebert is a physically developed quarterback with a good combination of arm strength and athleticism, has some twitch to his game. He's shown the ability to push the ball downfield and has a live arm both in the camp setting and on Friday nights. Transferred to Brunswick School for his senior year after missing a good chunk, if not the vast majority of his junior season. So we went almost a calendar year without seeing him on the field. What we've seen of his senior season is a first look at him in a while. And based on how he's playing as a senior, the arm talent is still apparent. He also has shown very good athleticism and rushing ability, running for 7 touchdowns. He'll bring that rushing element that we've seen Notre Dame employ with Riley Leonard. He has the ability to bring that to Notre Dame in terms of quarterback-designed runs. He's averaging 10 yards per carry, which Hebert can provide on the ground. With his passing, he shows the ability to make tough throws over the middle of the field. There's surely some things he'll need to smooth out as a passer. He has a tendency to just try to throw a fastball often. Adding some touch nuance and polish as a passer will help him. These tools to work with, there's some tools to work with here. Charles is excited to see what he does the rest of his senior year because he really didn't get going into the middle of September because the league starts later. Brings some traits to Notre Dame's quarterback room and provides another quality arm as the Irish continue to stack quarterbacks. Obviously wasted no time to replace Deuce Knight. So kind of summarizing Power's report there, really likes what Hebert brings on the ground, as you kind of touched on, Tyler. And he's still working as a passer, but that's not something I'm too concerned about there. I know his dad is a former quarterback, played professionally, I believe, on the arena circuit. So does have those traits in his bloodlines. And the one thing I want to mention about Charles Power's report, even though we, as in Blue and Gold, and everyone from the public, I guess, only have access to Hebert's highlights, Charles Power watches all of these guys' game film, like from start to finish. I'm pretty sure Charles even charts Hebert's statistics himself. So even the non-highlights, the full game coverage, Power is watching of Hebert. So pretty good report there from Power. Really like a lot of his analysis. I think he does an outstanding job for On Three. And how about Notre Dame going to snag one of Clemson's quarterbacks to replace Deuce Knight, and now they don't have to worry about bringing in a scholarship arm this offseason to pair with C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie, Stephen Jelly, and whoever else might be or might not be on that quarterback depth chart come January.
Yeah, I like that you take it there because obviously that's what I do in covering the team is kind of decipher and discern where guys fit. And I don't know, it seems like he's a good fit. Charles Powers said it. But Kyle, I know you did some background reporting and whatnot in the days after this. It seems like Notre Dame, and obviously they're going to do this, but they feel like they've got a guy who's right up there with a CJ Carr or a Kenny Minchie or even a Steve Angeli, who they think can start and win football games for Notre Dame. So in a perfect scenario, you keep all four guys. Not sure how possible that is in this era of college football, but when he steps on campus, I'll ask you this. There are people out there right now clamoring for Kenny Minchie to be the next guy, CJ Carr. There's some Steve Angeli stands. One of those is the namesake of this recruiting show. But do you feel like Blake Hebert is going to get enough traction? He does enough with his game, because there's things to like about all of those guys' games. That's what like Steve Angeli, the smart cerebral passer. People think that he could put up crazy statistics through the air. That's why they're clamoring for him. CJ Carr, the all-around guy, he just carries the weight of QB1, and that's why Notre Dame got him. Kenny Minchie, a little bit elusive. I mean, you saw it against Purdue, scores a rushing touchdown. Do you think Blake Hebert has traits that people in a year from now, 2 years from now are going to be saying, kind of like Mike Goolsby says, why not Kenny? Why not Blake Hebert? Do you think he comes in with that kind of ability and can kind of galvanize a fan base in that way?
Well, the thing that's been really interesting that some of our subscribers have shared on the Loose Emoji message board are some comparisons to Riley Leonard with Hebert's ability as a runner. And I think, Ty, as you know, with Angeli Carr and Minchie, none of those guys are half the runner Riley Leonard is. I don't think any of those guys have really a strong ability to run the football. Now, ironically, something I saw from CJ Carr during his high school career after getting out to see him a couple times, I kind of compared him to DeShone Kizer, actually, Notre Dame, in terms of his ability as a runner, where I don't think Kizer was really, I don't think a lot of people saw him as a quarterback that had the ability to run, but he could do it. I mean, he ran really well. I know he made some big plays during his Notre Dame career on the ground, and I think CJ Carr has some of that similar ability. And Notre Dame wanted a dual threat quarterback in this 2025 cycle. So they wanted a guy that could throw. They wanted a guy that could run. That's why they went after Hebert, because of his running ability. There was also another quarterback that they scouted throughout the process, Ethan Hawke, a Liberty quarterback commit, who is also a pretty exciting dual threat passer. So Notre Dame wants a guy that can move the ball on the ground as a rusher. So that's where I think Blake Hebert adds a really interesting element in that room, because they don't really have that. So could we see like a Tyler Buckner sort of package back in 2021, where they had Jack Cohn, playing quarterback, and they would kind of bring Buckner into the game and have him run? I don't know if Hebert's that great of a runner, but he is a guy that can move the chains with his feet, and I would be intrigued to see how early they get him involved at Notre Dame to see what he can do and add an extra element to that quarterback room.
I think the thing that I took away from the highlight package there was, yeah, he can run. And I said it. He ran away from defensive backs for a 60 or 70-yard touchdown. But most of those highlights were him sitting back, looking comfortable as a passer, wants to pass first. Charles Powers said it. The throws over the middle, like Notre Dame is not getting enough of those with Riley Leonard. Completely different game, obviously. New England high school football versus Notre Dame college football. It's a completely different deal. But that kid looks like he wants to sit back. He wants to make the throw. And if he doesn't have to, then he'll take off and run. And that's why I think the Kaiser comp is a good one because, well, I know you're comping him to CJ Carr, but it's that same like thought process of I want to pass first, but if I run, I have to. It's like totally different quarterback, but it's like the Caleb Williams or Justin Fields when he was at Ohio State. Dude was an excellent passer, but if he needed to run, he'd do it. But the pass first thing, I think that's what ultimately Mike Denbrock wants from Riley Leonard the most, and we've seen it against Stanford and a little bit against Louisville as well. It's, hey, we're going to drop you back and you're going to pass, but we also know you can do this, so do it if you have to. And Riley Leonard said that after the Stanford game as well. Was I'm never looking to run. I just run if I feel like I need to. So I think Blake Hebert might be that type of guy. And the thing is, though, David here says it's either Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr next year. I think CJ Carr has that too to the nth degree. And you hit on that, Kyle, where dude is a passer, wants to pass, but then he takes off and runs. That's exactly what Notre Dame's looking for. That's why I think CJ Carr has a really bright future. And it's a good problem to have, Kyle, where we're talking about all these quarterbacks and Notre Dame has to choose between one of them to start. And Blake Hebert's going to be entering that mix as well.
Notre Dame's in a really good spot entering next year at quarterback. I mean, we could have possibly been in a scenario where CJ Carr or, some other quarterback is the only scholarship guy on the roster after two guys transfer out and, another guy, Notre Dame's unsuccessful at getting a 2025 quarterback recruit. So I know this is something you've learned, Horka, that even though everyone kind of points to CJ Carr being the quarterback of the future for Notre Dame, Angeli and Minchie both have the ability. Both those guys really love Notre Dame. So kudos to them for a second round and possibly battling this one out in the spring.
Yeah, I definitely expect Angeli to do that because at that point he's kind of he's not the incumbent because he's not this year's starter, but he's got a head start, if you will, on those other guys. And he's got the confidence that he believes that he can to win a competition. Kenny Minchie has that too, for what it's worth, but he is kind of that middle. He's literally the middleman where you got CJ Carr breathing down his neck and then Steve Angeli, obviously a year ahead of him. So it's going to be interesting, but I do like that Blake Hebert is thrown into this mix. I also like that all of these quarterbacks that we just talked about, Kyle, they could be getting blocked for by somebody who flipped actually before Blake Hebert flipped this week, and that is Cameron Herron. So on Monday, Notre Dame flipped the 4-star offensive lineman, Cameron Herron, from Iowa. He was an Iowa commit as the number 375 overall player, number 32 interior offensive lineman, and number 6 prospect in Indiana. So he's a local kid. Officially visited Notre Dame for the Stanford game, which was his 4th time on campus. That's made easier by the fact that he is from Indiana, obviously. Also saw a bowl practice, attended junior day, and Irish Invasion. Like I said, it's easy to get up to South Bend for all of those things when you're coming from Warren Central in Indianapolis, Indiana. So, Kyle, basically going to open the floor to you on this one. Why did the Irish feel like they had to turn up the heat on this recruitment and get this thing done? And like I said, if we weren't talking about the Blake Hebert commitment and flip from Clemson, we would be all over this flip from Iowa. Iowa's another school that produces some good offensive linemen. Notre Dame flipped a pretty good one here.
Yeah, I'll pop on his film as I'm kind of talking to him. His midseason highlights are almost 10 minutes long. Number 58 here, the left guard, and he also plays some center here. So I'm not going to talk about Cameron Herron for 10 minutes, but I will add some extensive thoughts, I guess, so to speak, on Notre Dame's newest offensive line commit. And I think Charles Power, kind of going back to him, sort of put it best in a quote that he gave Mike Singer on the site earlier this week, that this is a recruit that Notre Dame could not go to sleep at night, peacefully knowing that they let get away from the state and go to Iowa. And I think that Cameron Herron's a guy they've really evaluated for a long time. You mentioned he visited back in December for bowl practice, made it back about a month later for junior day, then camped with Joe Rudolph at the Irish Invasion. So they've really been evaluating this guy for well over a year, maybe even going back to some of his sophomore year as well. And Notre Dame initially didn't really have a spot for him because they really wanted to go offensive tackle heavy in this cycle, considering they have the commitments of Owen Strebig, Matty Augustine, and Will Black at that position. But I almost think that – I don't know this for certain. This is just me kind of looking at things from the outside looking in, that when you see how Notre Dame has kind of – how like dire the center position has been for Notre Dame, like going in, Ty, you know this, that going into fall camp, like Ashton Craig is obviously a guy that I think Notre Dame sees as a potential NFL player, but they didn't really have a guy behind him. They had Joe Otting's seen reserve snaps, the redshirt freshman out of Kansas. He's played some late minutes at center this season, but I don't know if Notre Dame was completely sold on Joe Otting as their backup center going into the season, considering they worked Sam Pendleton at center at camp. They also worked Anthony Knapp back in spring at center. Was there any other guys, Ty, that I'm missing? Because they've tried out a couple different guys at center going into the season for a backup for Craig. I mean, I know obviously Pat Coogan has landed there.
Yeah, and I'll start there with what you just said with Coogan, because I think that says it all. It's Pat Coogan's a guy that started all 13 games for Notre Dame at left guard last season, gets his job swiped from him, but it's not like when Ashton Craig went out against Purdue, Notre Dame was like, okay, yep, Joe Otting, you're the guy that – because you have to think of it this way. We watch these practices. Pat Coogan – was battling for a guard position. Like I said that he got his job swiped. That wasn't a sure thing until August 20th or 24th, whatever. Notre Dame's playing a game on August 31st. So for all of fall camp, Pat Coogan's working at guard, man. He might snap a little bit just because Notre Dame knows, hey, you've got this ability, and just in case in a pinch, maybe you're our next guy. But it happens to where he loses his job. Ashton Craig gets hurt 2 or 3 weeks later, and all of a sudden he's really snapping and he's playing center. I think that says everything about those other guys that you mentioned, Joe Otting specifically, that Notre Dame got into this pinch and Pat Coogan was the one that needed to play center for them. I believe he has an extra year of eligibility, maybe not. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at our scholarship chart. So there's a world where Pat Coogan is starting, like you said, Ashton Craig's coming back and he's going to be a center, so he's going to take that job back. Not sure what Pat Coogan's going to do, but in a couple of years, you're going to need someone like a homegrown center. You're going to need someone like Ashton Craig, because that's what Ashton Craig is. He was biding his time and he developed into a starting center for Notre Dame, but all of a sudden he's going to be a senior in a year, Kyle, and you just have to keep that door rotating and bring new people in that you believe can do this. And as we're seeing on the tape here, Cameron Herron is one of those guys that snapped the football. And once the football is snapped, this is the big thing for me, Kyle, when I'm watching these highlights. And obviously he's playing some left guard here as well. But once the football is snapped, he gets after it. And, he's pancaking people. He's bringing people to the ground. Notre Dame would love to have that at center, because for a couple of years, I mean, Zeke Correll was a physical guy. He was a feisty guy in his own right. But I'm not sure that Zeke Correll has these types of like physical traits. And you mentioned Ashton Craig as like a big dude that could play in the NFL. If that's what you're going to set as your precedent for a starting center, it would be awesome if Blake Herron comes in and kind of just like continues on with that. And then all of a sudden, you're putting guys in the league like Craig and like Herron, and not guys like Blake or Zeke Correll, who ultimately had to transfer to NC State. He's not even finishing his career at Notre Dame. You want guys that are committing to Notre Dame, signing with Notre Dame, then going off to the NFL. And it seems like Blake Herron could be one of those. Ashton Craig could be one of those as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that I really do see Joe Otting have a future at Notre Dame at center as well. That's a guy here he stand before he retired, really pushed hard to get in the 2023 class, thought very highly of Otting, and considering he stands approval rate, well, maybe not the approval rating of NFL or Notre Dame fans, but NFL evaluators and some of the guys he's put into the league, like the Zach Martins and Quentin Nelsons, and there's been a lot of guys under here he's standing to go in the NFL, and he really liked Otting. So I think we've seen some pretty encouraging signs from Otting this year that he does have the ability to be the next man up after Heron. But here's my point. After Otting, they don't really have a guy that can snap or naturally play that position. That's why like Sam Pendleton moved back to guard and Anthony Knapp moved back to tackle. Now, I think depending on the way the Notre Dame tackle situation shakes out once Charles Jagusaw gets healthy, and then a 5-star offensive tackle like Will Black, who's basically Joe Alt 2.0 gets to campus, like does Anthony Knapp have a position on the starting offensive line, especially as left tackle? Could we see him play center? I think that's an intriguing thought, but you want as many guys on the roster that can snap the football. And I know this is like maybe kind of elementary to say, but this is something I wrote in my 5 thoughts. When Heron snaps the football, they're accurate snaps. And that that can't be undervalued or underrated. So that's a really big deal. And the other point I wanted to make on Heron that I kind of found interesting is for the last couple centers that Notre Dame has had, going back to Craig, Zeke Correll, Jarrett Patterson, these guys have all been 6'4" and over guys in terms of height. Cam Heron's about 6'3" or 6'2.5". So a little bit on the smaller end. I think that's why maybe Notre Dame initially didn't go after him, just because of the size and height with Heron. But I think he has the capability to be, I mean, obviously, if Iowa accepts this commitment, a big-time power conference offensive lineman. Like, before Jarrett Patterson was Notre Dame's starting center, they went a couple seasons with Sam Mustipher as their guy, and Sam Mustipher was right around 6'2", and Mustipher didn't, kind of my research I did a little bit earlier this week on him. I had learned that he had a really bad pro day at Notre Dame, and I don't know if that's the reason that he didn't get drafted in the NFL, but he did go undrafted. But the guy's carved out a 6-year NFL career for himself. So what did a pat on the back for Sam Mustipher, the career he had at Notre Dame, playing at 6'2" and that center position, and has gone on to the professional ranks. And whereas many may have not have pegged him initially to have an NFL career, now he's going to get his pension once he's done with his professional career. And I didn't find this out like in terms of my research at Heron, but I'm almost curious if Iowa saw this with him, of possibly being a Tyler Linderbaum 2.0, who is now with the Ravens, who played his career at Iowa. Linderbaum was the last center drafted in the NFL first round, and Linderbaum was also a guy that was about 6'2". So I don't think the heights are a really big deal here, especially as well as he plays on his film. I know the other thing that's really exciting about him is he has 34-inch arms, and that's not something that either Mustipher or Linderbaum had in comparisons of the height. I think they were right around 31, 32 inches. So I know that arm length is really intriguing to Notre Dame and something to be excited about, that he can move guys off the ball. He's already 275 pounds. Mustipher and Linderbaum, just to compare those guys, played their college football right around 295, 305. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all for Heron to get up to 300 pounds and play at that college-ready weight. So really like this pickup for Notre Dame. On3 is very high on him. Has him as an on 300 player in the class, number 19 interior offensive lineman, number 6 prospect in the Hoosier State. And before he committed to Notre Dame, he was actually a 3-star prospect in the On3 industry ranking. But how about this, 24/7 giving him the Notre Dame bump to the number 240 overall player, number 15 interior lineman in the class, number 6 prospect in Indiana, 4-star guy. And as a result, that bumped Heron's ranking to a 4-star in the industry ranking. So very good pickup for Notre Dame. I think this is one fans should definitely be excited about. Notre Dame's done a lot of legwork on this recruitment. Has been down to his school a bunch, and I think he's a guy that definitely has a future of starting on that Notre Dame offensive line.
Yeah, he made a really good point in saying you can never have enough people on your roster who can snap the football. I'll take it a step further and say you can never have enough guys on the roster that can just play offensive line, regardless of position, at the Notre Dame level, at the college level. And you're seeing that with Sam Pendleton. You're seeing that with Anthony Knapp, where those guys come in and you think they're interior guys. And Pendleton, like you said earlier, is playing some center and snapping the ball. He had his struggles there. All of a sudden, he's the starting left guard at Notre Dame. And Anthony Knapp, a guy that has guard written all over him, all of a sudden he's the starting left tackle at Notre Dame. So if you can play offensive line, just get your foot in the door, get on campus, start getting coached up by Joe Rudolph and these other guys, and you'll carve out a role for yourself. And I think Cameron Herron is one of those guys that he just wants to get in the door and carve out that role for himself and get coached by the right coaches and have the right mentors as teammates and whatnot. Because there's going to be by the time that he gets here, some guys that have been in the wars. Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton are still young guys. They will have been in the trenches and can kind of pass along some stuff to him. So I think he's just one of those guys that's just like next up in the pipeline. And speaking of guys who might be next up in the pipeline, you were down in Southwest Michigan recently, Kyle, for some other offensive line coverage. So last Friday, as I said, you went down to Southwest Michigan to see Notre Dame 2026 offensive line targets Sullivan Garvin, Gregory Patrick. Let's start with Garvin. Notre Dame offered him the day of his visit for the Louisville game, so pretty recently. Does not have a prospect ranking yet, and his recruitment is really only just getting started. That's the reason for that, but the Irish are very high on him. So tell us about your time in Allegan, Michigan, and what you kind of learned from Garvin and his recruitment as this thing kind of gets going for him.
Yeah, I made the trip up there on Friday morning last week to go see Garvin, who picked up his Notre Dame offer during the Louisville game at the end of September. But similarly to kind of like Herron, like this is a guy Notre Dame has been evaluating for a while. He made it up to campus with his coach back in the spring, and this was pretty much before. Well, it was before he had any power conference scholarship offers. I'm not sure he had many others either, but Notre Dame was already evaluating him. They made a trip up to his high school in the spring, Joe Rudolph, to evaluate him. And they also had him in at camp for Irish Invasion. So he's been on their radar for a while. They wanted to see his junior film. And after a couple games, they felt right away that they wanted to offer him and make him a target in this 2026 recruiting cycle. And he does not have a industry ranking yet. As you can see, 24/7 Sports does have him as a 3-star, ranking as number 40 offensive tackle in the class, number 13 prospect in Michigan. I think this is a guy Notre Dame sees as potentially having the ability to play on the interior of the offensive line. But still, even after his Notre Dame offer, not a ton of power conference schools getting involved. Just looking at his offer sheet here, the only two are Indiana and Washington. He picked up his offer from Indiana back on July 4th. Washington offered a few days after Notre Dame. But the reason the Indiana offer is significant is because their offensive line coach down there is Bob Bosted, who coached for a long time at Wisconsin, produced a lot of NFL guys. And one thing I've learned about Bosted is he will scavenger the entire Midwest for any offensive line recruits who look, walk, talk, anything like a Power 5 offensive lineman. So no surprise that he jumped into Garvin's recruitment pretty early on. And Notre Dame, similarly, Joe Rudolph, who also coached at Wisconsin, has produced a lot of NFL offensive linemen, both at Wisconsin and at Notre Dame. Loves their evaluation of him. They feel very good about him. I'm surprised more power conference schools have not gone after him. I know he's going to be at Kansas for a visit this season, Cincinnati, Purdue. He's going to make it back to nearby Western Michigan, who's actually doing a really good job in this recruitment. Like, even though Western Michigan's a Group 5 school, like Garvin, he is considering going the Group 5 route over some of these Power 5 programs. But with that said, I think Notre Dame is going to be way too hard for him to pass up. He'll be back for the Virginia game on November 16th. And to be honest, if things go well during that visit, I would not be surprised to see Garvin end up on Notre Dame's commit list. I did a story on him this week at Blue and Gold, published yesterday, about how he's putting Allegan High School on the map. Very small town, 5,000 people, not much there. It's not necessarily a one stoplight town, but it's pretty darn close to it. Some of their key landmarks are his grandparents owns a restaurant there that's actually haunted. They have a ghost there that they've named Ghost Jack, who's been known to take out the lighting on the candles and the electricity and just kind of fool around with some of the customers and employees there. So that's pretty much, other than Sullivan Garvin, the main attraction in Allegan High. But I encourage all our YouTube audience to read my story on that I published yesterday about how he's kind of putting Allegan on the map and really doing a big service to their high school. And I know a lot of our YouTube audience is also subscribing to Blue and Gold, but if none of them aren't, guess what? We got a great deal for you. $1 for 2 months using that code UND1. Check that out at checkout, and you can get on board with Blue and Gold. And I also know we have some outstanding other specials as well. So encourage you to check out this story. Notre Dame in pole position, I feel, here for Sullivan Garvin. And even though On3 has not yet rated him, I'm really excited to see what Charles Power does, because I think this is a guy that, like, On3 is going to be way ahead of the rest of the industry with, in terms of being a potential 4-star player and a top 300 recruit in the 2026 cycle.
Yeah, it seems like Notre Dame is all over those types of guys all the time. Now, obviously, they go after the guys who are ranked highly from the beginning now. That's kind of been Marcus Freeman's MO. But these diamond in the rough, man, like those types of guys, it's always nice to get them on campus as well. It's nice to pronounce names correctly, too. And I think I butchered Allegan, so I'll just say I'm sorry to Allegan, because it sounds like a very quaint, very nice town. Sullivan Garvin's from a nice place. Here's one that I won't butcher, Kyle. Portage, Michigan. You were there at Portage Northern to see 2026 4-star offensive lineman Gregory Patrick on Friday night. Number 123 overall player, number 17 interior offensive lineman nationally, and number 2 prospect in the state of Michigan in the 2026 class. So what do you see from him Friday night, and where does Notre Dame stand in his recruitment?
Yeah, after popping up north of Kalamazoo, about 40 miles or so, Allegan's located right in between, little west, but pretty much in the center of Grand Rapids, which I know you and I have been, Tyler, for a concert. We've been up there before, but Allegan's right in between Kalamazoo.
Shout out Nate Smith, man. Shout out Nate Smith. Good show.
He's got a new album out. I encourage Tyler to listen to it. It's not as good as the first one, but yeah. So, gosh, we should have stayed in that. Well, actually, I don't think we would have anywhere to stay in Allegan. I did not see one hotel in that town. I didn't even see a McDonald's in that town.
Did you say we drove through? It's south of Grand Rapids?
Yeah, a little bit south and a little more west. So I don't. It's off the beaten path a little bit. So I don't think we would have went through it. But after going to Allegan and meeting with Garvin and his head coach on Friday morning, I popped on over to Portage Northern High School, just a touch south of Kalamazoo, to see Gregory Patrick, who is, unlike Garvin, is already a full-fledged national recruit, has over 20 offers, most of them from power conference schools. As you can see, the teams involved are Michigan State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, Penn State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Alabama, Illinois, Purdue, Stanford, Kentucky, Wisconsin. I mean, truly a national offer sheet. He dropped the top 9 in end of July of some of his top schools, and I know Michigan State was in there. He's a Spartan Legacy, Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, Penn State, Nebraska, Alabama, Minnesota, all those schools in his top 9. I think Wisconsin in there as well. He's made game day visits to Notre Dame, Michigan, and Michigan State this year. Also going to pop on over to Penn State at the beginning of November for their whiteout game. I think those are the 4 schools that I'm really seeing as the true contenders for him right now. And basically my main reason why is because he wants to stay closer to home. And I think that's where that gives the three schools here leading on the On3 recruiting prediction machine the leg up in his recruitment, because they're all within 100 miles of his home. So I think that's a great sign for those three teams battling. I know he's been to Alabama because he has a relationship with their offensive line coach dating back to their time at Michigan State. But I think when all is said and done, he's going to end up at Notre Dame, Michigan, or Michigan State. I'm starting to sense, I feel, my gut tells me Notre Dame, Michigan battle. This is a prospect I have been considering an On3 recruiting prediction pick for Notre Dame, but I'm just not ready to get there yet. I think Michigan is battling pretty hard. I think I could very well see him ending up on the Wolverines commit list, but I think Notre Dame is also in just as good of a spot. And after seeing him on Friday night, I think if Gregory Patrick is not already on top of Notre Dame's target board in the 26 class, he should pretty much be there. He is a heck of a prospect. I won't call him a 5-star yet, but I think he has that ability to be a 5-star prospect. I've seen a handful of 2026 offensive linemen this year at camps and in games, and seen some of Notre Dame's commits and targets as well in the 25 class. And I think Gregory Patrick's the best one I've seen. He plays left tackle for his high school. Notre Dame's projecting him as an interior offensive lineman. And even though I've said that about Garvin and Patrick, in terms of how Notre Dame, I think, projects them initially, I think as we've learned, when these guys get to campus, they can pretty much play anywhere on the offensive line. I mean, Anthony Knapp's a perfect example, a guy that I think Notre Dame evaluated as an interior offensive lineman, had him at center in the spring, and then popped him over to left tackle this season. So Patrick could play guard or tackle, I think. I think he's really probably better off at the next level as a interior offensive lineman. But I'm glad that clip just played because I want to point this out. I played offensive line, not nearly or as well as Gregory Patrick. I'm about a foot shorter than him. But I was really impressed with his technique and blocking. He can make a number of different type of blocks. And Tim Hyde, please correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening back. But how about this one here? I think this is what you call a reach block. Look how he gets that defender turned and I guess adjacent to the ball carrier is how you would say it.
Yeah, so it's like he's pushing him away from where the ball carrier wants to go now.
Exactly. So he's not getting him off the line of scrimmage. He's getting him turned, and look, there's a lane right there. Yep. There's the hole for the guy, the ball carrier to run through. So it's just little things like that I saw from Gregory Patrick on Friday night where I'm like, okay, this guy's got it. You could tell his dad was a former offensive lineman at Michigan State. He coaches him at Portage Northern on that offensive line. So I really love what I saw from Gregory Patrick. Major target for Notre Dame in the 2026 cycle. And I'll have a story on Gregory Patrick's recruitment up later this week on Blue and Gold. But I already posted a story last night just from my conversation with his dad, just about Patrick's development a little bit and kind of some few thoughts of his performance on Friday night. So I think this is a guy Notre Dame should have on the top of the board if he isn't already. And boy, if Notre Dame can get a guy like Gregory Patrick and on that offensive line commit list, they're just going to continue churning out NFL-type players in South Bend.
Passes the eye test, doesn't he? I mean, my gosh, he was making some of those defensive linemen look small. I pray for the linebackers, and I even think a DB came down to try to do something against them in one of those clips. Good luck. That's what I was thinking watching that back. Hey, shout out to Lance Taylor in Western Michigan for showing up on some of these RPMs, though, recruiting prediction machines. I think it was we're 2 for 2 in talking about the last two guys there. So, like you said, probably someone of that caliber is not ending up at Western Michigan. That's more of a Notre Dame, Michigan type of deal. I think you laid that out perfectly. But yeah, dude, that guy. And you made a good point about, and I was talking about it earlier. Just get them on campus and see where they end up, because I'll even go back to someone like Jarrett Patterson, who comes to Notre Dame and plays a handful of different positions. And guess what? He gets drafted. He goes to the NFL and, looking like a serviceable player there. So that's kind of what Notre Dame wants to do. Just get on campus and we will get you right and we'll get you to the next level. Seems like Gregory Patrick is one of those types of guys that they're trying to go through that process with.
Absolutely. I'm very high on him coming off my trip to the Kalamazoo area. I love how On3's Charles Power has him ranked way ahead of the industry here as a number 72 overall player, number 5 interior offensive lineman. Next one is about 100 slots down overall with ESPN. I think all of these services are behind on him. Like, I'm even going to encourage Charles Power to bump him up a little bit more because I think Patrick has all the tools. He's the most refined offensive lineman I've seen on the high school ranks in terms of guys I've seen around the Midwest in person. And that's why I feel so strongly that Notre Dame should be pushing pretty hard for him. And Notre Dame has a pretty good shot to complete their 2026 offensive line class, all from guys in the state of Michigan between Garvin and Patrick, and then another guy who we've talked about on the show, Mike Singer and I in the past, Ben Nichols from Davison, Michigan High School. I have a prediction in for Notre Dame to land his commitment. He's from the Flint area. He's a little bit bigger bodied and a little bit raw compared to Patrick, but still a really talented offensive lineman. So, ironically, Michigan has not offered Garvin or Nichols. They're kind of being patient with some of the in-state prospects under Sharon Moore, but they are full-fledged ahead on Patrick's recruitment. So, true Notre Dame-Michigan battle, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, a couple others still lurking in that recruitment, but very excited about the potential of him ending up at Notre Dame. And by the sounds of it, Ty, I think you are too.
Yeah, can you imagine the what you'd be writing about potentially in about a year if Notre Dame gets 3 offensive linemen from the state of Michigan, and Michigan's always Joe Moore Award this, Joe Moore Award that, and I think that would be a little bit of a social media headline, don't you think, Kyle? If that's the route that Notre Dame goes, so that would be very interesting. This would be interesting too. We're going to close the show talking about 2025 class recruiting targets. Very topical conversation here because these guys have been to campus very recently, and Notre Dame is obviously very much involved in their recruitment. So we're talking about Jalen Cooper, Derek Meadows, and Nathaniel Owusu Boateng. Just kind of riff quickly on those guys, Kyle. What's the latest on some targets that I know fans want to know kind of what they're thinking and where they're headed?
Yeah, just some quick hitters before we close out. And I know that's always what Notre Dame fans clamoring for the latest on a lot of these guys. And I did a report earlier this week, I think actually published last night, on where Notre Dame stands for some of these guys with some help from my colleagues at On3, Mike Singer and Steve Wiltfong, On3's Vice President of Recruiting and Transfer Portal, also kind of what I'm hearing as well. And I'll start off with Jalen Cooper, who was at Notre Dame for an official visit this past weekend. Coming out of that visit, I think, as Mike put it, his recruitment was too close to call, but now we're starting to hear that Notre Dame is picking up a little bit of momentum, which is an encouraging sign for the Irish, considering he told Singer that he wants to make a decision about a week out from his official visit to Notre Dame. So if we're going to take Cooper at his word for that, I think he should have a decision finalized one way or the other by I'm getting a phone call here. Sorry about that. By Monday next week. I wouldn't be surprised, though, to see him drag this out a little bit more. I think just like 1 week is ideally where he wants to be, but I think Notre Dame is looking much better in this recruitment as time goes on. I don't think that On3 recruiting prediction machine is accurate reflecting Cooper's chances to end up at Notre Dame. I would like him much better than these 3 other schools who ended up as finalists for his initial commitment, which happened to SMU on July 5th. And how about this? I don't think anyone saw this coming before On3's Steve Wiltfong reported it earlier this week. Notre Dame's still going after Derek Meadows, the high 4-star wide receiver who committed to LSU in July. For most of his recruitment, he was leaning toward Notre Dame, as evident on the recruiting prediction machine. I know Singer felt that he was going to end up at Notre Dame. A couple other analysts around the industry really pegged him as a Notre Dame commit, but ended up favoring LSU at the end of July. But Notre Dame is keeping in touch with him there, and Wilt Fong reporting that he is not going to be surprised if Meadows ends up on Notre Dame's campus sometime this fall. He's got 2 games to do it, the Florida State game on the 9th and then the Virginia game on the 16th. So we'll be on the lookout to see if Meadows pops up on campus. Notre Dame has 3 wide receiver commits with Jerome Bettis Jr., Elijah Burris, and then Antavius Richardson. They're hoping to have a 4th with Jalen Cooper, or even Isaiah Mizell down from the Orlando area, an Arizona wide receiver commit that they had up on campus for the Louisville game. Even if Notre Dame were to get Cooper or Mizell to bring that class to 4, we're hearing that Meadows is a take-no-matter-what prospect for the Irish. So keep an eye on that one, see if Notre Dame can flip him from LSU. I think personally that's going to be pretty hard to do, considering he's committed to what many consider wide receiver U down there in Baton Rouge, but I think Notre Dame is firmly in the mix and still in the picture despite him being committed elsewhere. Last one I want to touch on is Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, the half-brother of former Notre Dame linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Owusu-Boateng dropped a top 6 before the start of the season, I believe when it was sometime within the last 6 to 8 weeks, and 6 schools battling for him still are Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Southern Cal, Texas, and Florida. But he made an official visit to Colorado last week, and after that visit, told On3 national recruiting expert Hayes Fawcett that the Buffaloes are now one of his top schools, so call that top 6 a top 7. Notre Dame hoping to get him on campus for the Florida State game. That visit is set. Now we'll just have to see if he does indeed make it to South Bend for the 3rd time. I'm expecting that to happen. But another interesting development besides Colorado emerging as a top school, Ty, your Texas Longhorns were supposed to get him on campus for an official visit this Saturday. I think Georgia's going to be in town for Austin.
That's right, and college game day.
But Owusu-Boateng will not be. He actually moved his official visit to the 23rd. I forget who Texas plays that weekend. Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, man.
Well,
people see me as the Texas guy, but I'm all Notre Dame when it comes to football season. I can tell you who Notre Dame plays every single week, but I can't tell you Texas's schedule off the top of my head. But I do know they play Georgia this weekend. It's going to be a big one.
But on the 23rd, they'll have another home game, and Owusu-Boateng is expected to officially visit the Longhorns that weekend. And I know some Notre Dame fans are a little bit stressed out about that visit coming after his Notre Dame trip now, but I'm going to be honest. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. With the amount of times he's moved around that Texas visit, considering they've emerged late in the process as well, I'm personally just a tad skeptical if he makes that trip to Austin. Of course, wouldn't be surprised if he does get there, but I think as many times as he's moved that official visit, if I'm Texas, I'd be a little bit weary if he does get to campus. And I know they're still targeting guys like Riley Pettijohn from in-state who committed to Ohio State, and probably some others. I know Madden Farimo was on their wish list at one time, Notre Dame target as well. So just 3 quick hitting updates on 3 Notre Dame targets in the 2025 class. They got about 7 or 8 of them left at this point, and I touched on most of those guys last week, but wanted to give the latest on those 3 before we close out the show.
So when you say 23rd, you're obviously talking November, right? Because October 23rd is in 6 days. I looked at the calendar, how it has the little date on the top of the screen here. I can't believe it's already October 17th. That's crazy. But Texas will be playing Kentucky that weekend in
That's it. Yep.
Should be a tune-up for a certain game on the 30th that is being played for the first time since 2011. I'm not sure if Texas A&M is only going to have 1 loss still, and that 1 loss being to these Notre Dame Fighting Irish at that point. But either way, if you love college football and you love college football rivalries, tune into that thing on the 30th. It's TBD on the kickoff time, so hopefully that doesn't conflict with Notre Dame USC, because you know where I grew up and you know where I went to school, Kyle. I am totally locked in on what happens in College Station, Texas. I'm bookending my college football regular season with eyes on College Station, Texas, Kyle. I was down in College Station for the season opener between the Irish and the Aggies. Awesome game, awesome environment. Can't believe that was already 6 or 7 weeks ago or whatever it was. And in another 5 or 6 weeks, I guess I'll have all eyes down there as well. So, but as for this show, heck of a show, man. We talked quarterback flip, and we talked an offensive line flip. We talked more offense. We talked more offensive linemen. We talked wide receivers. We talked a Notre Dame legacy recruit, if you will, with Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng's half brother being JOK. That dude is a beast in the NFL. You know that. If there's one thing the Cleveland Browns do well, it's put that guy on the football field and let him go. So maybe his brother is that same type of guy, and Notre Dame would obviously love to have him in the class. But other than that, man, I think we went over it all. Do you think we're missing anything? What's your last word here before we let these people go?
My last word is I won't be upset if you head down to Texas the week of the 30th and send me out to SoCal to cover that Notre Dame USC game.
That's hilarious that you think about that, because the way that we set up the back half of this season, I mentioned it earlier on this show. I'm going to Atlanta for Georgia Tech. Jack is going to MetLife for Navy. And then we have 2 home games that we'll obviously both be at. But is there one that I also went to that he didn't go? I don't remember. But the plan right now is send Jack to USC and I don't go to that game. So if we have it in your budget, go ahead. I haven't had a Thanksgiving dinner at home in Texas since probably 2017.
Wow.
So if I'm able to go home,
holy, that's crazy.
Yeah, think about that. Mississippi, because Mississippi State, I covered Mississippi State for 3 years before I got to Notre Dame. Kyle, they play the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving. It is a Thanksgiving night game. So that was 3 years. And then obviously Notre Dame goes out to California, whether it be Stanford or USC every year. So that's where I've been the last 3 years. The silver lining in that, my mom's family lives in the Bay Area, so I've got to do Thanksgiving with my grandpa and my aunts and uncles. 2 of the last 3 years for Stanford, but no family in Los Angeles, ton of family in Texas. So maybe we'll work something out. We could do that offline because, like I said, we're going to let these people go. We appreciate you guys being on for this video. Definitely like it. Subscribe to our channel because we have a ton of recruiting tidbits and whatnot with Kyle Kelly and Mike Singer, a ton of team content with myself and Jack Sobel. We're doing it all throughout the weekend for the Georgia Tech game, and then obviously the Navy game as well. And then we get a little bit of a breather. Maybe that's when we'll sort out those plans for USC, Kyle. But until then, like I said, keep it glued here to this channel, and definitely go to blueandgold.com for all of our written work as well. So we will see you guys next time.